Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be joining us from. We'd like to welcome you to this week's Breaking Bad Careers LinkedIn Live with Coach Eli and myself, Coach Peter. We're live streaming across LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. So whatever platform you're joining us on, we're super stoked that you're with us today. Last week, we did our inaugural LinkedIn Live, or streaming live. We did an AMA that was wide open for any type of career question. And we had lots of great questions about lots of different career development topics under the sun. We did our best to address as many questions as we could. I don't know if we got to all of them, Eli, but we did our best. So this week, we thought we would focus in on career communications, and specifically, we're talking about the resume and the cover letter. And there might be some questions around LinkedIn as well, but we're happy to address those really quickly. But we're really focusing in today on that, 1 or 2 page document, the resume and then the cover letter. So anyway, thanks for joining us. We're super stoked you're here. My name is Peter Hill. I am one half of a really fun, dynamic partnership that we call Your Career Strategy. I am an international career coach. I have been doing this type of work since 1999. And I've been really blessed to be able to help tens of thousands of job seekers over their careers. I have my own private practice called PHI Consulting, Peter Hill International, of which Your Career Strategy is one of the projects that is kind of folded in to PHI Consulting. In addition to my private practice, where I do work one-on-one with job seekers, I've also worked in higher education. So I spent about a decade running career centers in higher education, right? So hopefully those of you who have taken advantage of your career center at your university or your business school, you kind of know what I'm talking about. You go to them for career advice, and they're there to help you kind of move you closer to your goal, whatever your job search goal might be after you graduate. So I worked in career centers. I've led career centers at Halt International Business School in Shanghai and London and Boston. And then more recently, I spent about a year at the University of California working with business school students there. So that's a bit about myself. I should probably mention, I actually started my career in career coaching as a professional resume writer, right? So I bring this kind of unique perspective to everything having to do with career and job search because I started writing resumes professionally for clients who were looking for resume help. So I hope that expertise is helpful today. I'm going to toss it over to Eli for his introduction.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, super interesting background. I love working with you. I always learn something new. My career started off more on the consulting side. I was an accountant by trade, technically. And throughout my career, I actually ended up creating close to 12 different resumes that I actively have on file. So, I have resumes for accountancy, for financial analysis. I have resumes for sales and recruiting. I have resumes for career coaching leadership roles, which I most recently had over at WeWork, and career advisor roles where I got to really work closely with you in supporting hundreds and hundreds of students from over 120 countries in landing jobs all over the world. And what we learned is resumes take so many different shapes and forms depending on where in the world you're located, right? And I'm sure those are some things that we can touch on today as well, as we have quite the international demographic and international reach based on our audiences. So I'm super happy to be here today to discuss resumes, especially during this time when I think job applications are extremely saturated. So many, I keep getting people reaching out on LinkedIn or on Facebook and, scheduling calls. And on these calls, they're just hey, I'm applying for jobs. It's been 5 months. It's been 6 months since I've been laid off. And it's just, I'm not getting called back. I'm not even getting an email that says like, no, you're not being considered for the role, right? So like, what's actively happening to my application? Is it my resume? Would you mind looking at my resume? I think it's my resume. And I think we're going to get the chance to talk a little bit about like what's actually going on behind the scenes with these applicant tracking systems, while at the same time hitting on how you can really more effectively and most effectively present your profile through these personal branding documents like the resume and the cover letter.
Awesome. So for those of you who've joined us today, we welcome you to, whether you're on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, just go ahead and throw any questions you have into the chat. We're more than happy to address them. The first question that comes to mind for me, Eli, is to throw one over at you, and that is, what is one of the biggest, say, misperceptions or challenges that you see, right? When we were working together at the business school, and we had students coming into the career office and asking for resume help, right? We would always see kind of these common themes of either misperceptions or challenges, or the themes of types of questions they would ask about their resumes. So what would be like maybe one or two top ones for you?
I mean, the questions like, oh, I have like so many internships, or like, I've had like a few jobs in the past. So I think everything, I don't want to miss out on anything. And, my resume is like 2 pages. Is that okay? And, I just want to make sure that my audience is getting to read every single thing that I did. So that's one of the main questions that used to come up as we were, bringing in and taking a look at students' resumes.
So I've actually heard two questions in what you said, or 2 themes. One of them is about like resume length, like how long should my resume be, right? And that's a very common question. And we would definitely want to hash that one through, because there is a massive myth that needs to be busted around that one. But then the other theme I heard was around, like, I have all these things I want to make sure that the employer knows about me, and I want to try and make sure I cram it all into my resume, right? And tell my whole story on paper, because I feel like this is my only chance to tell my whole story. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, those are the 2 themes pulled out from that scenario.
Cool. Shall we tackle the page length one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So here's the myth. Not sure where this myth came from, but it's I've seen it time and time again through conversations with job seekers, through conversations with my clients, through my own research online. I see all kinds of commentary around the idea that a resume should only be 1 page. And I don't. I know you have your commentary around this as well, Eli. The way I describe it is like, this is a massive myth, with a few exceptions in the world of finance and some companies in the world of management consulting that are very explicit about expecting a 1-page resume. But that's like 0.0001% of the employers out there who say this. And so what is it about this idea that a resume should only be 1 page? I mean,
I'm honestly not sure like where the trend started, where I think it's just like when recruiters had so many resumes coming through, they only had so much time to actively read through and scan through a resume. So it was requested that most job seekers would limit it to 1 page and keep the most relevant content on that page. Now, that's not a bad approach. There's a lot of benefits to having a 1-page resume if you're able to, kind of keep your points relevant, keep them concise, keep them to the point, while at the same time, like hitting on all of the responsibilities and all of the, competencies that the role itself is looking for. But these days, recruiters aren't the first line of defense against the resume. So what we're looking at these days are people trying to cram things onto one page, reducing all the possible white space, making it very difficult to read, and I guess without having the understanding that the applicant tracking system on the back end is actively giving the resume, whether it's like 1 page or 3 pages, a full scan and taking into consideration all the keywords that are coming through. So I think back in the day, it was just that you're dealing with just humans actively going through, but now even startups are able to afford applicant tracking systems that kind of help streamline the recruiting process. So that might be one approach, but I don't know what's. I feel like you may have some more insights on the 1-page resume versus the 2.
Yeah, so I have seen and written, as I mentioned, I used to do this for a living, where that was all I was doing, is people would hire me to write their resumes for them, which is a much more involved process. And it sounds like it's not just, send me your old resume and I'll rewrite it. There was actually a large consultation process behind it. But I guess what I'm getting at is I have seen and I have written 1-page resumes for super senior executives. I've also written 3-page resumes for super senior executives. I have seen and written and coached younger professionals, bachelor students, master students, to write a 1-page resume. I've also seen, even at the bachelor level, I've seen some 3-page resumes, and they've been very effective, right? So I think what I'm getting at is a couple of things. One is, let's not over obsess on page length when it comes to your resume. If the mistake I see is that, job seekers massively overcomplicate that question. It's like they're focused so much on oh my gosh, if I write a 2-page resume, they're never going to read it, and or they just over obsess on this particular question, page length. And that's the totally wrong question to obsess over. The right question to obsess over, well, there's actually 2. One is, who's my audience, right? And we can unpack that one for hours and hours and hours about the importance of understanding who your employment targets are, and right? But so one is understanding your audience. And then number 2 is communicating your value and your story on paper in a way that appeals to that audience. And so if that means that it requires 2 pages to tell your story when you're a bachelor student because you've actually had 4 internships, then that's fine. On the other hand, if you're a bachelor student who has had no internships and no part-time jobs and only has a few, say, academic projects, then perhaps a 1-pager is more appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. And you can extrapolate that into more experienced professionals, right?
There's this myth also that people utilize. It's for every 10 years experience, then you get 1 page to add to your resume, right? So what are your thoughts on that school of thought?
I think it's a decent starting point to maybe think about it. But as I mentioned, I've seen 2 to 3-page resumes for younger professionals because they've been doing all kinds of great things, and all the things that they have done, whether they're internships or community service or academic projects or jobs, they're all an integral part of their story, right? And if they're about to graduate from a bachelor's program at the age of 21 or 22, and we end up with a 2 or 3-page resume for this person, then it completely blows that rule out of the water, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a decent starting point to have a conversation. But I don't know, following that, you also have senior executives who are 30, 40 years into their careers. So does that mean that we absolutely should have a 40-page resume for a CEO? No.
Fair. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of us spend a little bit too much time pondering page length when the real question behind it is relevance. It's like, are we coming off as the most relevant version of ourselves for this role, right? So, I guess we have a question here on like, well, when you're discussing relevance, so how does one really show up as the best version of themselves for a particular job on their resume?
You want me to share my thoughts on that one?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, sure. So it really comes down, so relevance is relevant to your target employers, relevant to your reader, right? Now, Eli talked about your reader might be an applicant tracking system, and we can unpack that one certainly in this conversation, right? But generally speaking, your reader is your employer, your target employers, right? And so, understanding who your audience is, I mentioned, is an important frame to look through, right? So, what industry or industries, and then what type of roles are you going after? And then the third part is geography as well, right? So if you're going after a particular role and you've done your research and you know that role requires hard skill A, B, and C, and soft skills A, B, and C, and D, then relevance means that you're able to frame your professional background and your story to showcase those hard and soft skills. All right, that's a very simplistic way of thinking about it. This is a very simplistic but powerful way. Same can be said for industry. If you're going after a particular industry, and you know that companies within that industry expect certain skill sets, and the technology comes to mind in coding skills and things like that, right? Yeah. So making sure that you showcase those types of soft skills and hard skills on your resume. And then for geography, how geography plays into this, and then you and I have worked with thousands and thousands of international job seekers, right? Helping people cross borders in their careers. Yeah. So the way that plays in is very straightforward, right? If you're looking at an international career transition or a cross-border transition, then make sure that your resume tells a story of having lived and worked in other countries, having traveled to other countries to deliver projects, having worked, even if it's virtually, working with virtual teams in other countries, things like that. Oh, and then of course there's language skills. So you want to make sure you highlight those as well, right? Yeah. So I don't know, those are kind of the first things that jump into mind with regard to relevance. But is there something there you want to unpack a bit further?
So I guess I could lead with maybe a story of an encounter I had just the other day, right? So I'm working with this one individual, and we're taking a look at their resume. And on their resume, the individual had shared that they're very interested in going into data analytics or data science. However, their background experience was primarily in engineering, like traditional engineering, industrial and civil engineering. So all the experiences have their background and the title being, civil engineer 1 or traffic engineer or something like that. But a lot of the work that they did was very focused on data analysis, using SQL, using Visual Basic, and writing scripts and writing queries, and doing a lot of this technical work that could very well support them in positioning themselves as a data analyst and or a data scientist, right? So one thing I always find when I'm looking at these resumes is relevance is almost like you want to be as blatant as possible when you're applying for a job where you have a role that you're going for and it's a data science role. And it says, hey, we're looking for a data scientist. So why on your resume would you not just include the fact that I'm a data scientist? So it's a lot of people start with like a professional overview or a summary statement or something like that. But right above the summary statement is really a great place to just write the title of what it is that you're going for, right? So if you're a operations manager, don't just put professional summary, put operations manager. One, it's very optimal from a keyword point of view. Two, as soon as a recruiter looks at that, they're like, oh, this person's very relevant for this role because they are calling themselves the exact thing that I'm hiring for. And but we're not telling you to lie directly on your resume. I don't want that to like, oh, but I'm a civil engineer. I'm not a data scientist. Why would I say I'm a data scientist when I have no experience doing that? But if you unpack it a little bit, it's like, actually, you spent the last year and a half doing very data science-based work, right? And you're applying for these particular roles, and you're trying to identify as a data scientist. Therefore, positioning yourself in that way is going to really help differentiate you and make that quick first impression from a relevance point of view.
Yeah, that real estate on a resume, whatever the length of the resume is not the point, but that kind of top quarter or top third of the first page is like the most valuable real estate, right? So it's just below your name and contact information, and right above, typically your professional history, right? That real estate is like gold, in my opinion, right? So you talked about the idea of having a headline. Headlines are absolutely best practices, and that actually prompts me to think: did we get one of those video snippets from one of our live webinars and put it on our YouTube channel?
Yeah,
about the resumes.
Yeah,
right. We have that there, right? Okay. So yeah. So if you're listening to this today, go over to our YouTube channel, and we have I think it's probably a 3 or 4 minute snippet of a live webinar we did about the resume summary section, so you can see an example of exactly what we're talking about right now. So having a headline is a best practice to kind of brand yourself and be really clear about your targeting for your target role. And right below that, 3 to 5 lines of a professional summary. Right. And I'm not talking about an objective statement. It like blows my mind that people still use these like completely archaic dinosaur objective statements.
The purpose of this resume is to find a job where I can perform and exceed expectations of the company and find gainful employment, right? Or whatever.
Right. It's like, hello, of course, right? That's what everybody wants, right? Or if they do have a professional summary, it's written in a very superfluous way. Superfluous, is that the right word? For example, it'll say something like, a results-oriented team player who excels in fast-moving environments, right? It's like, well, guess what? That's what everybody needs to do these days. So you're not really standing out when you say that. And then you're also, if you're saying you're a results-oriented team player, you're asking the reader to trust you, right? So there are strategies involved with writing, a really solid professional summary, not too short, not too long, not more than 5 lines at the very, very most, but really focusing on not making vague claims about your professional value or your personality or your work ethic, but really drawing out what's your professional value in terms of years of experience, around core competencies, around if you are a team player and you've led teams, how many people have been on those teams and where have they been located? Yeah. Things like that are much more powerful than claiming that I'm a results-oriented team player.
Yeah, 100%, and that goes not just for the objectives or the overview or the summary of your accomplishments, but throughout the entirety of the resume, right? I can't tell you how many resumes that I get the privilege to review where people are just talking about just general responsibilities, responsible for presenting these reports on a weekly basis, or just very blanket statements that give me an idea of, okay, I guess I can see what you do day to day, but like not really what the impact was that you had in this role, right? And I think that's where people can start really differentiating themselves, is if they start trying to showcase the impact that they were able to have in their role for the business, for their teams, for their organization, then you start painting a picture in the mind of your audience and your reader of how they might see you plugging into the new role that you're applying for. I don't know. What are your?
So well, this is perfect because we just had a question come through. So the question is, I read a lot about the fact that resumes need to be kind of accomplishment oriented. They need to showcase my impact rather than just talk about what I was responsible for. So the question is, how do I make sure that I can really emphasize my accomplishments and really have them pop off the page so that the reader sees them?
So
I'll let you tackle it.
Yeah, let me just. I'll just say I had a few key ways that I think this is possible. So resumes are extremely word heavy, right? There are a lot of text. There are a lot of words. It's paper. It's words, right? In there, we're using a lot of vocabulary, a lot of active verbs to just demonstrate things that you took action on and did. But one way to really draw attention to something that you accomplished is to throw in quantitative metrics. So we want quantifiable goals, numbers that help someone showcase maybe if you're in social media and your goal is to grow a following on 2 or 3 different platforms. So you could say, yeah, I've grown the social media following for X brand on the Instagram platform, or you can share a percentage or a number, from just 300 followers to over 30,000 in over the course of 3 months by doing X, Y, and Z, right? So instead of just this person grew a following, it's from how much to how much, and by utilizing what strategies and how did they think about those strategies, right? At the end of the day, if you're able to showcase to your reader how you thought about and implemented a strategy, then all of a sudden you let them deeper into who you are as a person, and it stops being surface level responsibilities and things that you were expected to do, but actually the things that you were able to achieve and accomplish.
So quantifiable impact is 1000% important, right? Business is all about numbers, period, right? So I think the additional hack I want to add here is to break a few rules of grammar. Generally speaking, of course, we want to make sure that the documents we put out there are, there's no spelling errors, it's grammatically correct, it's, attractively formatted. But I use the term grammatically correct quite loosely because I think we all know that a resume, we typically don't use personal pronouns like I, me, we, that type of thing, right? So we're gonna start bullet points with action verbs, grew a team from 4 to 20 over a year and a half, or increased sales X% over whatever time period by doing A, B, and C, right? Yeah. So we're going to break the rules a bit further on the metrics in using numbers. So by the stricter rules of grammar, whenever we're talking about a number between 1 and 10, or 0 and 10, we're supposed to spell it out, right? So 1 is O-N-E, 3 is T-H-R-E-E, right? So the rule of thumb we're going to break here is to not spell out any numbers on your resume. We're going to, if we increased a team from 3 to 5, we're going to use number 3 and number 5. If we increased market share from 9% to 15%, we're going to use the numbers 9 and the number 15, right? And by doing that, we actually help the numbers jump off the page because it's, our mind's eye kind of draws itself to those numerical figures on the page. It's a really interesting piece of, I don't know if it's psychology or what, but it does work.
Yeah. 100%. We had another question pop up, Peter. Just going to air it here. So it's from Jake Dean.
Yep.
How do you come about showing how you've done such things and successfully impacting business without sounding like you're bragging?
So, I have a pretty strong viewpoint on this, which is you almost do need to brag, and what I mean by that is that you want to be honest. You don't want to be too modest. You do want to toot your own horn, okay? But you don't want to embellish, or of course, we never ever lie on our resumes, right?
Yeah.
So, as writers of our own resumes and as storytellers of our own accomplishments, when we go to job interviews, we have to tell the stories as well, right? It's kind of human nature to feel like, oh, I feel like I'm bragging, right? But what I want to encourage you to do, Jake, is to, do what you can to overcome that feeling, and to take the risk of, even though it feels like you're bragging, reframing that assumption to, I'm being honest. I'm telling the employer what I did, and I'm proud of that accomplishment. Okay. Why do I know this? Well, so Eli and I, we run workshops. We've run hundreds of workshops along the lines of personal storytelling and drawing out accomplishments, stories of accomplishment from the workshop participants. And we're intentionally trying to get them to revisit some of the success stories they've had in their lives, whether it's personal or community service, or could be work, could be academic. We're intentionally trying to get them to revisit those stories and to tell those stories in their small groups in the workshops, right? And we kind of craft the activity in a way that they kind of have to toot their own horn. They have to talk about what they're proud of, right? And then at the end of the activity, the way we debrief it is we literally ask them, how did it feel to tell your stories? And, we hear things like, oh, it was actually really fun to revisit the stories. I felt motivated. It put a smile on my face to revisit it and tell it to somebody else. And then, there are a couple of other participants who say, on the inside, I felt proud, but I didn't want to say too much because I felt like I was bragging. Okay. So I'm getting to your point, Jake, about feeling like you're bragging. But then we asked the next question of the listeners in the group, and we say, how did it sound to hear the other person tell you their story? And we never hear things like, oh, I felt like they were arrogant. Oh, I felt like they were bragging. No, we hear things like, wow, I really felt like I got to know that person better. Or, wow, I was really impressed. Things like that. So Jake, while you might feel like you're bragging, I want to encourage you to think about how you can reframe it and just be honest about your accomplishments and talk about the business impact you make, and have faith that the listener or the reader is not going to take it as arrogant or bragging.
I'll just also say that, think of it like a highlight reel video for sports, right? So, if you have the top running back prospect going in and sending their highlight reel to the NFL, it's not, that's not considered bragging, right? This is like how they're being considered for a top tier role as like the starting running back for a professional team, right? So similarly, you need to be giving your top highlights and this highlight reel so people can see what it is you're capable of doing for them as well. And we need to kind of talk the talk and put everything out there and kind of showcase the numbers and showcase the stats and just kind of show how we're thinking and show how we go about creating and cultivating results in a meaningful way. And, many of us wouldn't want to just put subpar achievements or, things that didn't quite meet expectations, right? We always got to push ourselves to get comfortable with. And I think, Peter hit on it, and this is the core point. It's getting really comfortable with talking about yourself in this positive way and actively believing and understand that you accomplish these things. And no one, especially on a resume that's being looked at to bring you on for an opportunity, will anyone look at that and say, this kid's really coming off as very cocky. So we'll just leave it there.
I would add that, I know we're talking about resumes here, but in an interview, there's a difference between confidently, honestly sharing your accomplishment and being arrogant. And it has to do with the tone of your delivery and things like that, right? So that's a whole other topic. But ultimately, the employer is interviewing you. They're evaluating your resume for a reason. And that's because they need to grow their business. They need to hire people who are going to make an impact and help them achieve what they're trying to achieve as an organization. And when you are able to tell your stories of success, demonstrate your business impact, then what you're doing is you're helping build a picture in the mind of the reader. If it's the resume, it's through that platform, and if it's an interview, either way, you're helping build that picture of, oh, I could see this person doing that here at my company, right? And that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to persuade them to build that picture in their mind that you're the right person for the job. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm super stoked. I just saw Dr. Mo Woolen jump on the live. So, hey, Mo, how's it going? Thanks for joining us today. I hope you brought a whole bunch of your students with you.
We also got another question from Kristen. So Kristen asks, YouTube video. Introducing yourself to supplement the traditional CV. Is a YouTube video a new approach that one can take to supplement the traditional resume when submitting job applications?
Personally, I think it's a fantastic idea if it's done right. Okay. And if it's done right, it has a lot to do with understanding who your targets are, understanding your professional value, really being able to craft, the script, if you will, of what you want to say in a way that's relevant to your targets. I recently took part in, I don't know why it prompts me to share this with you, but about a month ago, myself and another project partner delivered a talk. And I know you did the same thing, Eli, on a different topic, but we delivered for EFMD, Hired Career Services, right, over in Europe. And they had what they called the Pitch Perfect competition. And it was essentially, 30-second pitches or 2-minute pitches, elevator pitches of these university job seekers all over the world, right? And they were video-based. And some of them were really, really well done and super impressive. And then there were others that had a lot of room for improvement. So if it's done well, I don't really see a downside. And it does take a lot of work to make sure it's done well. And I'm not talking about production quality. I'm talking about making sure you have your targets clear and know who your audience is, have your script clear, and have your delivery really well polished. And then I think it can make a lot of sense. What do you think, Eli?
So I like the idea of doing a video introduction. It's just not typical that you're going to have space to include it in a online job application. Like maybe there's include your website, and it's just not guaranteed that anyone's going to be able to click on that or will click on it first before then going into your resume, right? So if you're going to do something like a YouTube video to introduce yourself, perhaps it makes more sense to actively find the hiring manager for the role and write an email. And in that email, you just start off by either embedding that video right there so they can play it live, or
that's a great idea.
Or you just include hey, I wanted to virtually introduce myself to you first, just so you get a feel for who I am. Check out this little video intro, and then have the hyperlink there, and then you can basically utilize the email as a cover letter. Have a few quick hitting points to just get them excited about your profile, and then you can attach the resume. Now, there are a lot of ways to incorporate digital media into resumes these days, particularly if you have, like if you're a lecturer, right, and you want to showcase some of your lectures, you can embed those into your resume as, backup. So it's like lectured at X university and, have published the X paper. So why not a link directly to a piece from that lecture, or then a link back to the particular piece that you published or that was written, right? Similarly, if you're a software engineer and you're going for new roles, it would be fantastic to see recorded demos of the applications or the tools or the software that you've built. So you can like use a video software like Loom, right? And you can video record your screen. You can walk someone through a demo of what it is that you've created, and keep it to like 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and then just take it and link it back into the resume. I think multimedia does a really great job at kind of sprucing up or like bringing resumes into the 21st century in a way, and it personalizes it even further, and makes it engaging and interactive. Whereas in the past, it was I could only read this, where now I can kind of click in and get a feel for, oh wow, look at what you designed, look at what you created, oh look at how you speak, look at how you present yourself, look at how you've done this in the past, right? So if you have that type of experience and you have some of it recorded, or you feel confident recording yourself in that way, why the heck not?
I love the idea of embedding it in an email. I really like that one because it makes it really accessible to the receiver of the email. It's different. We almost never see it. So if it's embedded in a very easily accessible way where they can literally click on it right there and it starts to play immediately, I think that's brilliant. And then to Eli's point, like I think 2 minutes at the very, very, very most. I would even aim for under a minute if possible. But you want to keep it brief because you want to ensure that they watch the whole thing and get to the end where you kind of make your final pitch around, I can't wait to talk with you. I can't wait to explore the possibility of working at your organization, right? You want to make sure they hear that pitch because you want to make sure the video is well presented. It's polished throughout the entire snippet, but the call to action at the end is super important. You want to make sure they see that.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's just joining us, please, if you have any questions that are top of mind, that have been burning inside of you as it relates to resumes, cover letters, job applications, particularly during this pandemic crisis, which has caused job application numbers to spike, right, and cause some serious saturation. We're happy to take your questions. Just throw them in the comments, and we are happy to dialogue and answer anything that comes up.
You're welcome, Kristen. So, a question that comes up, and I actually got this question just last week, was about, gaps between employment.
Solid.
Right.
Yeah.
Solid question. Sometimes overcomplicated in terms of, kind of getting stuck on the limiting belief that that's going to like ruin everything, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that to be a totally false assumption. And the question came out of the fact that, 2020 was a total mess. People have lost their jobs. We all know what's been happening. But they get concerned like, oh, I lost my job in March because of COVID. Now I'm going to have this 6-month gap or 3-month gap or whatever. And then that lends itself to the larger question about if I have lost my job through whatever reason, and then it took me, it's taken me 6 months to find a job, or I took a break to take care of a family member, or I took a break to do a leadership development course at Harvard, or whatever it might be. There's always this question around gaps in experience. So what do you think?
So right now, everyone understands that we're in a crisis, right? So you gotta play that to your advantage. I think people are very understanding that companies are not laying people off because the talent pool is not good enough, and people aren't performing where they should be. It's just that economically, organizations are having to be extremely frugal and smart with how they're budgeting for their resources. So they're having to make lots of cuts, and those cuts are resulting in people being laid off, right? So I know it's easy to feel like, oh, maybe if I perform better, or maybe if I did something different, I'd still be there. Listen, what's going to happen is going to happen. And there's nothing that you could effectively do if this is part of your path, right? So we'll encourage you not to get too stuck on the fact that, maybe you've been out of work for 6 months. Own it with confidence that, hey, it's a pandemic. I've been actively looking. I took some time off to really focus on myself. I did some introspective digging. I spent some quality time with my family. I did some work around the house. I like to, renovate. So I did some renovation projects, and I got to use my hands, and those are things I enjoy doing. And now I was applying for roles, and I feel fortunate to have now come across this opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to diving back in after a break to kind of recover from the burnout that I was experiencing in my last role, whatever it is, right? And I guess like one other bit, if it's outside of the pandemic and you've been out of work for 5-6 years, maybe as a mother, right? And you've taken time off because you're a new mother and you wanted to really focus your attention on, spending time with your kids, supporting them while they started going to like daycare, kindergarten, et cetera. And now you're feeling the itch to like go back to work because kids are going to go back to school a little bit more full time. Then I'm just going to tell you straight up, you don't need to make any excuse for why you chose to be at home, to be in one of the hardest professions that exists. You know what I mean? It stems to this personal confidence and this bullshit societal norm that exists that like we always need to be on, we always need to be employed all the time, we need to be working our ass off. If we're not burnt out, something's wrong with us. And that's not true. That is not true. Deep down, we need to maintain this confidence in ourselves that, yeah, I'd made a decision to take time off because I want to be there for my kids. And I actually was able to, potty train them in 13 months. How many other mothers have been able to do that? I was actually able to do this, able to do that, able to do the other thing. Well, all at the same time, I've been honing on my skill sets in, digital marketing. I've been reading this book. I've been doing this, that, and the other thing. I'm ready to dive back in, right? But it's that confidence. It's that confidence that comes out. That you give yourself the space to do. Maybe it's difficult to do it on paper and a resume, but that's why it can't just be resume focused. You can leave the gap there, but you need to be following up with people. You need to be networking. You need to be conversing, right? And it's easy to say. It's easy to say, just have confidence in how you're positioning yourself. We know it's not that easy to do. But Peter and I are always here. If you're ever feeling this lack of confidence, if you're ever feeling like, hey, I don't know how to think about this gap, reach out to us. We're here to help build you back up.
I think in addition to the confidence piece, I mean, that's massive. That's like huge. And then not only with regard to gaps, there's always confidence questions around, am I good enough? Imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm not as good as the competition. Other people are more qualified for me. That's a whole super important piece that Eli and I work on as career coaches. To circle back to the gap question, what's important is that, if you've had a gap of say a year or more, then you do want to give some type of indication on your resume around why the gap's there. Okay. And I'm not super fond of the term gap. The term gap makes it sound like a negative, right? It's just a break of some sort. It's a break from full-time employment. Maybe it was doing consulting work. I think I saw a comment from Chris Lewis about, gig workers and things like that. So maybe you were doing some gig projects. Maybe you intentionally took a year off to do a leadership development program through a MOOC of some sort, whatever it might be. Put that onto your resume. Tell them the reason that you took the year off, right? So otherwise, don't over obsess it, please. I've been a hiring manager. I've collaborated with hiring managers. We don't over obsess the gap. If we see a longer gap of say 2 or 3 years, do we have a question? Sure, we look at it and we go, this person otherwise looks incredibly qualified. I think I'll call them for an interview, and then in the interview I'll ask them about why there was a gap there, right? But we don't over obsess over it, so I don't want any of you to also over obsess on it. Okay. Thanks for joining us, Lee. I love your comments. We're going to have you as a guest someday. There was a question from
I think
Jake. Yeah, that's
Jake again.
Super good question. So the question is, do you suggest we tailor every resume for every single job we apply for? So probably Eli and I could give you this answer verbatim in tandem here. And the answer is a resounding no, you don't, right? I don't think anybody has time for that, especially knowing that a job search is a bit of a volume game. It just kind of is, right? You do need to have a certain volume of employers and contacts that you want to follow up with. And if it's job openings on job boards and whatnot, you need to have a certain volume that you're applying for. And the volume is quite large. Let's be frank and clear, right? We're not talking about shooting off a dozen resumes and expecting success, right? So, and therefore, because it is a bit of a volume game, the question is who has time to tailor your resume every single time you apply for a job? It's just too time consuming. So what we recommend is, number one, have clarity on your employment targets in terms of industry, function, and geography. Okay. And then for each of those different types of targets, start with a version of your resume. So I guess the best example, which I often give, would be the example of myself, right? So I'm currently back in self-employment as a career coach, but there was a time when I was in career services management in higher education in London, right? And if I was looking for the similar job in London, but at a different school, then that would be a target: higher education, career services management in the UK. And so I'd write a resume that would be relevant to that target. And I would probably submit that resume to lots and lots of different schools throughout the UK. On the other hand, let's say I wanted to stay in the UK, but I wanted to target, internal career coaching inside organizations. Okay. Then we're talking about a different skill set, because I'm no longer talking about career services management. I'm talking about delivering hands-on career coaching within organizations. So I would take that target in mind. I would rework my resume. I would highlight the transferable skills, and I would highlight the fact that I have developed and built relationships with employers across the UK and around the world, and things like that. So I create a different version of my resume for that target, and I would probably use that version for all of the companies I identify within that conceptual target, right? So there we have probably hundreds of potential employers and only 2 versions of a resume, okay? The one thing I would add would be, for my real A-list companies or organizations, say my top 5 or top 10 of the ones that I know I would really, really, really love to get a conversation going with them, then I may choose to do some small tweaks that would appeal specifically to, in my case, whatever it might be. Let's say it's Harvard Business School or London School of Business or INSEAD in Paris, whatever. I might do some tweaks to really drill down into those specific employers. But otherwise, no, Jake, nobody has time to write a resume for every single employer. Whew, that was my diatribe. I'm very passionate about that topic. Eli, did you have anything else to add on that?
No, I'd say like it has to be role specific, right? Like if you're going for multiple roles and you're like, hey, well, I'm actually applying as a operations manager, then your resume, if you came from, I don't know, let's just say accountancy, and it's really specific to like writing journal entries and doing month-end closes and things of that nature, maybe I want to alter the language there to be really focused to how how the job description is discussing what an operations manager does. And then if I'm applying to other operations manager roles, then I will utilize that same exact resume that I just adapted. Now, if I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go for operations manager roles, but I also want to go for sales roles, well, then I'm going to need to shift the way I'm talking about my previous experiences to showcase how I utilize consultative conversations in the workplace, how I was able to persuade my team members to kind of do something different, right? I want to showcase these aspects that are of the competencies that are more relevant for sales, right? So very similar. I'm saying basically the same thing Peter said, with just different examples. It's like, if you're going for a different role and different target, then yeah, change your resume. If you're going for the same job that has a lot of the same expectations, then you don't need to change much. So
yeah, I think most people who are managing their own careers can usually get along more than fine with no more than 3 or 4 versions of a resume. Most people, 2 to 3 is all you really need.
Yeah. And then, unless you're me, then you have 9. I'm kind of nerdy. We're nerds for this stuff, though. And I think between the two of us, you and I have probably each done, I know I've done at least well over 4,000 resumes.
I lost count.
So if I've done that many, I assume you've done like 5 times that.
I lost count.
Cool. Well, we're nearing the end of our conversation here today. We want to, thank everyone for their questions. Thank everyone for their participation. Peter and I really, really love supporting all of you, or anyone who's actively grappling with some type of level of career clarity, or has a question as to why they may not have had as much success in landing a job that they've been aiming and gunning for over the course of the last few months. We encourage you to reach out to us, right? We're here, we're live, we're actively working for ourselves. We have our super fun company called Your Career Strategy, where we run workshop series that literally helps groups of very enlightened, very interesting, and very cool people dig deep into who they are to figure out what motivates them, what energizes them, what can they be doing on a daily basis, so that way they can feel like they're living their purpose day in and day out. So that's one thing that we do. Outside of that, Peter and I are both coaching clients one-on-one, right? And we do some outplacement coaching, which means that we're supporting, unfortunately, lots of people who have actively been laid off during the pandemic. But not unfortunately that we're supporting them. We're super happy to be doing that, but it's unfortunate circumstances right now. But it's actually amazing to see all of the successes that these individuals are having coming off of what feels like a loss, and then landing something that is so much more aligned with what it is they should be doing. So if you have been laid off, if you know someone who has, if you know someone who's been job seeking for quite some time over the course of this pandemic, or maybe before, or if you just know that you're not really that contented in the work that you've been doing, and you want to figure out, what the heck can I do at this point in my career to really shift into working in my energy center? Well, I think the best thing that we can recommend is just schedule a 30-minute conversation with us. You can just go to www.yourcareerstrategy.com. You can click to book a free discovery call with us. Literally, we will just spend those 30 minutes listening to whatever challenges you want to discuss, and we will coach you around those challenges. You know, it's a holiday season. We're here to help. We want to gift as much coaching as we can and support as many people as we can as they actively navigate ways to really improve and enhance their career outcomes for themselves. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So by all means, give us a shout. Book a discovery call from our landing page. 30 minutes. There's like zero obligation. We're just here to help. If you have questions about our programming, of course, we're going to share with you about that. But we'd love to help you, whether it's, you know, a blocker, a limiting belief, a question about the job market, whatever it might be. We're just here to help. So look forward to talking with you guys.
All right. Until next week. Well, actually, probably not next week. It's the Christmas holiday on Thursday, so it's like
taking time off, man.
Yeah, yeah. Even though we love doing this, we're gonna take some time off and wish you happy holidays, happy New Year. 2021 is going to be freaking awesome for a lot of people coming off of this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody. And Eli, thanks for the great work today.
Right.
Always fun to partner with you.
You as well, sir. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Take it easy.